everybody, and welcome back to Out of Bodies, 31 Days of Halloween. Today, I'm going to be talking about another Haunted Memphis episode. This episode is called The Old Brick Church. Now, the Old Brick Church was originally called Third Presbyterian Church. It's known as the Old Brick Church because it's actually the first brick church built in the city of Memphis. It was established in 1856 by local charter members, and it was completed in 1860. The total cost to build this church back at that time was $11,000. That's cheap. But back then, that was a lot of money, I'm sure. And the church is located at 299 Chelsea Avenue. The first pastor of the church was Reverend Edward E. Porter, who served in the church until April 1862, when he decided to become a chaplain in the Confederate Army. In June 1862, the Civil War started to come to the Memphis area, and so the church was actually used as a hospital on the upper level, taken over by General Grant and his men, and then the lower level was used as storage and for stables for like horses and mules. So since the church was taken over, that meant that the people having their services there could no longer do that, so they ended up having their services at a local cabin, which was located on 968 7th Street. Now, interestingly enough, the government actually reimbursed the church for having used it during the war, and they gave them $1,200. In 1916, the church was renamed Chelsea Avenue Presbyterian Church and was then led by Reverend Fontaine, and his last name I'm probably going to butcher, but yeah, I'll put it up on the screen. So today the church looks to be abandoned. I have not driven by it myself. I've been meaning to do that because normally I work downtown, but with the whole pandemic thing, I'm actually working from home, so I'm not driving out that way. But Centennial Baptist Church owns it apparently, and the reason why it's still empty and has not been redeveloped because of such a large amount of taxes that are owed on it. Apparently it's what's called tax dead. So getting into the ghost sightings, what's interesting about this church is that the documented ghost sightings started happening back in the 1800s. So it's not like, this church was built in the 1800s and then, in the 1900s or 2000s, people start talking about ghosts because it's so old. It's like, no, actually in 1889 is when the first documented ghost sighting happened. So the church is located actually on a corner. What people claimed even back then is they would see this woman appear on the corner outside of the church at 2:30 in the morning every single night after night at the same time. Now, even at this time, it wasn't at all necessarily uncommon for a woman to appear at a corner at that time of night in Memphis, but back then in that particular neighborhood it was uncommon, so people noticed her, and when people saw her they just thought she was a living human being, and they just thought, well, why is she there, but whatever, okay. People were just used to seeing her, and they just kept going about their business. They just didn't think anything about it, didn't research into it or anything. Apparently the woman looked to be pretty young, about 20 years old. She was slim. She had red hair. She was always wearing this white robe with a black sash and a large dark hat which covered part of her face. So apparently she started to become kind of like this inside joke, I guess, kind of the laughing stock in a sense to a lot of people, especially to men. Like they would drive by and be like, oh, look, there's your girlfriend, or oh, here comes my girl kind of thing, like, here's my girl again. So guys would joke about it and stuff, but nobody really knew why she was there, who she was, or anything, until one night a group of guys decided to walk up to her and see why she was there. She actually turned away and walked towards the side door of the church and then disappeared. The guys tried opening the door and it was locked. I guess they thought maybe she just went in there and they just didn't see her open the door or something. So the same group of guys came back the next couple of nights to try to catch her, but the same thing happened night after night. They would get close to her, not super close, but they would kind of approach, and as they got nearer, she would just turn away, walk towards the side door of the church, and go right through it, or just disappear. Now, after word got around about her vanishing into the door, lots of other people then would try to capture this vanishing woman. Even police tried to capture her. Even police tried to you know, walk up to her and ask her what was going on or whatever. They tried to capture her. They couldn't do it. She would do the same thing. She would turn around and walk straight into the door, and she would just disappear. Now, at this point in the game, word had gotten around enough to where people realize now that she's not this living person just standing on the corner, this mysterious person. She is a ghost that keeps disappearing, but also keeps showing up night after night at the corner. Now, one night, somebody decided to get smart, and this man actually met her at the door. So instead of, like, everybody else kept trying to walk towards her from the street and then she'd turn around and go through the door, what he did is he actually was standing at the door and waiting for her to show up to see if she would still show up at the corner, if she would show up at the door, or what would happen, basically, to see if he could catch her. So for this part, I'm actually going to read in this Haunted Memphis book. I used this a lot not last year, the year before that, last time that I did 31 Days of Halloween. It's written by Laura Cunningham, and it's in a series called Haunted America. So anyway, I'm going to read the excerpt out of here because it's easier to just read it to you than to like paraphrase it. All right, so it says, finally, one young man had the idea of cutting the ghost off at the door instead of chasing her from the street. One night he arrived at the church at exactly 2:28 a.m. and stood in position blocking the side door of the church. He knew if the ghost made her appearance and kept her usual routine, which she had now been doing for weeks, she would be forced to come in contact with him. While he waited, he nervously glanced up and down the streets. There was no sign of anyone except an old dog sleeping peacefully on a front porch. He gripped his pocket watch tightly in his hand, watching with anticipation as the minute hand finally clicked to 2:30 a.m. At that moment, he looked up, and there, standing at the corner, glowing in the moonlight, was the young woman. He waited for her to move, but she seemed content to stare mournfully into the darkness. Finally, the young man coughed loudly to get the ghost's attention and called to her to come to him. The woman immediately turned and quickly walked toward the young man. When she was within feet of him, she lifted her head, and he became the first person to fully look upon her. In an August 6, 1887 article with the Memphis Appeal, the young man reported, "And such a look! I have seen despair and horror depicted upon blanched features before, but the very worst was a sweet smile in comparison to this. Her large, sunken, yet lustrous eyes pierced me to the heart, and her mouth and cheeks put on a look of intensified terror that chilled me." So this article was actually in August of 1887. So earlier I said 1889, it was actually like before that. The ghostly woman reached out her arms, intent on embracing the man. He willingly embraced her back, only to realize that he was not actually touching her, for she had passed right through him. He turned around to find that she had gone straight to the door, had turned back once more to the man, and he says, fixing upon me a look that seemed intensified tenfold, and which no power on earth could secure my consent to look upon again. And then she was gone. So that's really interesting. I thought, you know, a lot of the stories I've talked about on my channel here, people talking about it in the first-hand accounts and stuff like that. Not that there's necessarily a timeline as to when people start seeing ghosts, but it seems like I thought this one was really interesting because it's actually a ghost story that dates way back into the 1800s, you know, instead of being like, you know, in the 1950s, you know, or now, present times, people seeing this apparition that was from, you know, way back when. But I just think it's interesting. Nobody really knows where she came from, why she's there. I don't know if she still appears. That would be something interesting to find out. But it's also kind of sad, you know, because it seems like from that man's experience, he seemed to think that she was just very, very, very sad in a very, very dark place and just mourning over something, you know, maybe mourning over her life. Who knows, you know, it makes me wonder how she died, you know, and if she still appears there. So I will have to find that out and maybe do another video on that, but I hope you guys enjoyed that. I thought it was really, really interesting. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next spooky video for 31 Days of Halloween. See you tomorrow. Bye.